Seabot was that white, half a man who projected different faces and would talk to you. So he's only supposed to move and talk when someone is actually messing with him. But I can't tell you the number of times I was walking through connections in the dark, and I would hear that sound of him moving. And it was his eyes. He was turning his head, his eyes were watching me walk across connections. And my knees are a little turning jelly just thinking about it. There's something about that is just a big no-no for me. I cannot say, and like all of us just, Seabot was such a creep factor. And sometimes kids would leave his face set on that Exorcist face, or they would leave it set on Spider-Man, which is bright red, and just, oh, it's awful. And then for him to watch you and like track your movement across that space. No, thank you.
Is he gone?
Yes.
He's in storage right now. And unfortunately, I came across him in the dark, completely unexpecting it. Just opened the door, it's like, oh God, thanks about it. Now this is something that's been going on for a while, but the best story I think actually happened last year during one of the ghost tours I was doing. So we actually have a history of motion sensors going off randomly. And usually we shrug it off. Like if a motion sensor goes off at 2 a.m. in the lower science center and nothing else goes off, it usually means one of the old scarves had fallen from the tube. Like, yeah, that happened. There have been a couple times though where motion sensors went off and we couldn't figure out what the heck had sent it off. Like had like some sort of like fly got in front of the motion sensor or something, we don't know. But Chris and I have both experienced times where we were alone and locking up the building. This is Chris Chandler. And suddenly, as we're trying to alarm the building, it reads motion sensors for us. And it'll tell us where the motion sensor is coming from. And it'll say, you know, top of main staircase, motion detection. Middle main staircase, motion detection. You know, lower science center, motion detection. And it'll tell you exactly where it's coming from. And the most horrible thing is we both had this happen, where it seemed like all the motion sensors were just coming closer and closer and closer and closer to us. And that's a hard thing to shake, I can tell you that, because you're like, okay, someone's in this building with me, I cannot see them, I don't know what's happening. And sure, sometimes, you know, one of our custodians is locking up and we didn't realize they were still here, it's like, oh, okay, you scared me. But there was a time, Chris and I were locking up in the lower science center, and from that panel you can see all around you. You can see just about everything. And when the motion sensor started reading top of staircase, middle staircase, lower staircase, middle of room, all those motion sensors, and we knew where they were and we knew what they should be picking up, and we just don't see anything. It's completely invisible to us what is setting off these motion sensors. And we're both just, what is it? What is it? What is coming for us right now? We have no idea. Now this machine, you might recognize from our Rube Goldberg exhibit that we had last year. We had it during October last year, and we were doing the in-person tours, the ghost tours in the dark with flashlights. And I was on my second tour of the night, and I was still pretty new at it. And we were going in, and we had just finished talking about the Colonel Davenport murder, and we were standing in front of the Colonel Davenport doorknob that we have on display in our exhibits. And we're getting ready to move on to talk about the John Deere family. And suddenly, this machine starts going off in the next room. And it was kind of a bell chimes, bum, 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 kind of like a clock going off on the hour. And I suddenly heard it going off, and I kind of froze, because I was like, that exhibit's locked. We're not going in that exhibit. No one's in there right now because that's off limits right now. And everyone in my tour just saw my face and they stopped themselves and they're like, what is that? Like, it's part of the exhibit next door. And it's going off for some reason. And I don't know why, but it's doing it. So, you know, I told them, like, maybe our exhibit manager is over there working on things. Maybe Sean's over there. Well, after the tour, I started thinking about it, and I texted Sean. I was like, were you in Rube Goldberg tonight? Were you, like, working on it tonight? And he's like, no, I went home at 4. I'm like, okay, well, did you leave the door open? Or, like, is there any, you know, was anyone going in there to work on things? He's like, no. He's like, everything's locked up. And so I went back up there and I pulled on everything, made sure it was locked. The next day I investigated this thing and went in during the daytime to check out this particular exhibit piece. It's motion activated. You have to step in front of it. You have to do this to get it to work. You have to pull on different ropes and make different movements in front of it to get it to light up and actually make sound. So how did that happen in an empty room? In the middle of telling ghost stories, suddenly this happens. It's still like, and I don't know, it was one of the weirdest things we had happen the entire time. There was always little odd moments during those ghost tours, but that's the one that really sticks out for me. It's one that gave me chills when it happened. Our star, not the Putnam, Isis Nefrit. Now, it's common enough for a mummy to come to a museum a long time ago, and then for us to learn more and more about it as time goes on. Technology improves, we're able to study it a little bit better. Now this was donated by the Palmer family, by D.J. Palmer, son of Daniel David Palmer, founder of chiropractics. And the Putnam, upon investigation, realized that the mummy that was inside the sarcophagus does not belong to that sarcophagus. Now the sarcophagus is labeled and gives us the name Isis Nefrit, a temple chantress. She lived about 3,000 years ago, and she died around the age of 25. She's a young woman. The mummy is about 600 years off on the timeline, and the mummy is a woman who died in her late 40s. She doesn't match. She's not the right person. Now, the Egyptians, in their mythology, believed that upon your death, your soul or your spirit divided into two, created your Ka and your Ba. And your Ka was the part of your spirit that remained at your tomb to receive offerings. So when your family would come by and drop off, food and flowers for you, all the goodies that you want in the afterlife, your Ka would receive it for you. Your Ba is the part of your soul that traveled to the other world, had its morality weighed and crossed the river, and had its morality weighed against a feather. And if your soul was as light as a feather, and meaning you were a good person in your life, your Ka was allowed to live on. You could stay in the underworld if you wanted, but often Kas would come back to Earth, and they would like to visit their body and their tomb. And when you visited your body, your Ka was able to rest. It's a way for the Ka to sleep, is to go back inside the body and fall asleep for a while and recharge a bit. When you remove the sarcophagus, when you remove the mummy from the sarcophagus, you're splitting up key parts of the soul, making it impossible for them to rest. Isis Nefrit, her Ka cannot rest because her body's not in there. It's the wrong person. Can you imagine how Isis Nefrit felt coming home and finding a stranger? Now, this poor mummy that's inside is also nameless. We don't know who this is. Because she doesn't have a name attached, she's not labeled. It also means that her Ka cannot rest either. Her Ba cannot rest. So we have a mysterious mummy with no name, and we have a sarcophagus with no body. Stands to reason there's two very confused Egyptian spirits wandering around in this building. Could it be them? And one thing I can tell you, and this is kind of a little bit of an inner joke amongst museums that have mummies. I remember learning about this in Colorado when I was in school. It's an odd little factoid, but apparently museums that have mummies in their collections often experience weird electrical interference. It's just an odd little trend, and it created this kind of running joke in museums that the spirits of mummies, these Egyptian spirits, like to play with electricity. They like to mess with it. It fascinates them. So anytime a motion detector goes off, like, oh, it's ISIS, she's messing around. The elevator runs on its own. Oh, ISIS enough for you. She likes to play in the elevator. It's no big deal. Just let her do her thing. Some exhibit piece pops on and starts working without any explanations. Like, okay, ISIS, take it easy. Like, you're scaring me a little bit. But who knows? This building has thousands upon thousands of objects that belong to people. People who have entire stories and lives behind them, who had personal and emotional connections to those pieces of art, those objects, those everyday items. So who knows? We could be full of different spirits in this building. It could be never-ending investigations into, what's going on and what personality seems to be out today. I tell you, when you're working in a museum, especially one with mummies, you're never bored. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks, Nora. That was fun. Okay, well, we're going to make the rest of the meeting as painless, but not nearly as entertaining as Nora. Because we don't have tables or anything for you to read old minutes, which would actually be from our February meeting last, well, it was still 2020, believe it or not, February was, but, and so we're just going to forget that. But thank you, Allison, for taking minutes today. Appreciate it. Mary Ann Francis is our regular secretary, but she has